Guys, and welcome to episode 20 of Forget Your Warranty, the review series for Gran Turismo's aftermarket tuner cars. And this particular pick is based, of course, on the Honda S2000. This is the Mugen S2000, and the S2000 is actually one of the most prolific tuner cars in the game, along with the Skyline. This particular version of the S2000 I personally find quite an interesting car. Visually, it sets itself apart with the ducktail wing on the boot lid and also the rather pronounced lip extension on the front bumper, as well as, of course, a carbon fibre bonnet, but that's really something that you can get on a number of S2000s. But the really pertinent question to do with this car, as with any tuner car, is what kind of improvements does it offer, if any, over the road-going version from the main dealership. On many occasions, the S2000s tend to be very good as tuner cars, whereas vehicles like the Skyline, although sometimes having an impressive spec in tuner form, generally aren't as good as the Nissan version. The S2000s, on the other hand, do tend to have quite a bit more variation. You've got the Opera Performance S2000, which is a very strong track car. You've got the Amuse S2000s, which are very visually extreme and almost completely different to any other S2000. You've got the AEM S2000, which is a great drift car, and a variety of others in between. This particular model is a more street-level tuner car as far as the S2000s go, something more akin to the road-going version of the Spoon S2000, not the yellow and blue race version, but the blue road car. And with street-level aftermarket cars, any discrepancies that they have tend to be more forgivable, because at the end of the day, they tend to just be showcases, really, of what that company has to offer, visually and performance-wise. Whereas with racing versions, any discrepancies that they have tend to be more disappointing, because after all, they should be superior vehicles. You're not necessarily asking for better numbers in every way, but some kind of significant improvement is to be expected from those cars, justifiably so, especially when you're spending more on them. So when some of those vehicles aren't necessarily quite as good as the normal version, that can be justifiably disappointing. So is that the case for the Mugen S2000, or is this just a nice addition to the car range? Well, consider what you get. First of all, there's the price. This car's pretty reasonable. Being a street-level vehicle, it doesn't have a ridiculous price tag. The price of 50 grand is not too bad. For that, you get, of course, front engine, rear-wheel drive, a 2-litre VTEC engine, which you can turbocharge up to just under 500 horsepower, 492 to be exact. It achieves peak power at over 9,000 RPM, peak torque at just under 9,000 RPM, and incidentally, the peak torque is 290 foot-pounds, which is okay, not too bad, and the weight on this vehicle is very good. 1,044 kilos is not bad at all. The horsepower per tonne is decent enough, kind of what you'd expect from a tuned sports car at 471, and the fully tuned PP sits at 538. So it has, on the surface at least, a pretty good spec sheet. The power is reasonable, the weight is very good, the price is pretty reasonable as well, the PP isn't ridiculously high, and the horsepower per tonne is good enough. Visually, we've already covered the differences, and I would say that this is probably one of the most visually striking versions of the S2000. It really does look completely different to the others in terms of its shape. It has a completely different silhouette to the other S2000s. Now, in terms of performance, street-going aftermarket tuner cars do tend to have an advantage in terms of straight line speed, especially top end, because they don't have the kind of downforce and aero restrictions that a more track-inclined vehicle like a HKS Evo or an Amuse Carbon R tend to have. That is definitely the case with this car. The top speed is pretty good, over 200 miles per hour on this vehicle. The acceleration is also decent enough, and the handling, I would say, is pretty good on this car also. Very good, in fact. This is, I would say, one of the better all-round aftermarket tuner S2000s. Not necessarily the best, but certainly a good all-round one. As far as racing goes, you could use it. it does have potential to be a race winner, depending of course on the power, the PP, etc. But it definitely does have that potential. Maybe somewhere around 475 up to maybe 500 PP. It could be pretty useful for that kind of thing, especially on a track which requires good all-round performance. Not purely straight line speed, not purely handling, but a mix of both. This car has that. So overall, as far as aftermarket tuners go, this vehicle isn't necessarily anything special. It doesn't offer more power, for instance, than the Honda Premium S2000, and it's slower than that car. But if you're looking for an S2000, again, like the Spoon street-going S2000, that's just an alternative take on the S2000 as an overall package, then you may enjoy this car. If you're an S2000 fan, you definitely will. If you're not an S2000 fan, I wouldn't necessarily recommend going out immediately and getting this car, because there are definitely more interesting and definitely faster vehicles out there. But if you're looking to buy something after you've got every mainstream or obvious option, then the Mugen certainly isn't a bad car. It's not an amazing car either, but it's a pretty good one. Somewhere in between, I would say. But overall, that's it for this particular pick. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.